Hey everyone! Before we get to the Yooka-Laylee first impressions, a quick correction. On the last main episode of the Kongversation, we said that the Yooka-Laylee rap was performed by Chris Sutherland and Grant Kirkhope. Even ignorant morons like us should have known that it was Chris Sutherland and Kev Bayless. We would like to apologize to all of the grievously wounded parties, and we're glad we can confirm our complete lack of credibility. Now please believe everything we have to say on how you should feel about Yooka-Laylee.
The Kongversation. The Kongversation.
Mini version. It's more trivial than it normally is. And the theme tune isn't as long.
Hello and welcome to the Kongversation Mini. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Cameron Reigle.
And we are doing a mini episode today because I have played Yooka-Laylee. Got an early copy thanks to the fine folks at Playtonic. Thank you very much. And so now I can confidently say what I think about the game. Because there's been a lot of mixed critical opinion and a lot of people who are looking forward to Yooka-Laylee are now kind of deflated because so-and-so only gave it, 3 out of 10 and this and that, and that's rubbish, and you should feel bad, Playtonic, they say. So I am just one man's critical opinion. I've played the game for about 3 hours now, and which I realize, isn't a lot of time to accurately give my whole thoughts on the entire game, because maybe the whole game turned shit somewhere around World 4. I don't know, but I can give you my first impressions of the game and kind of allay some of the anxiety that's out there. So, real quick, I will be keeping this spoiler-free for the most part. We will be getting into more spoilerific thoughts on the next main episode of the Kongversation next weekend. But for now, this is just more kind of experiences playing the game, my first thoughts, and really whether the game has been worthy of the massive amount of hype it's gotten in the last 2 years.
And since haven't played the game myself, and I'm not keen on hearing spoilers either, I will serve to keep you in check on that.
Thank you.
Maybe we need like a spoiler safe word or something.
Banana is my favorite safe word, but you don't want to know what we do with a banana afterwards. So anyway, all right, I'll just come out and say it because there's no point in building up the suspense. This is a game made for Rare fans. Just point blank, it's made for anybody who was a fan of Rare, especially in the mid to late 90s. So, with all due respect to all the critics who have been kind of slagging it off, there is absolutely nothing wrong with Yooka-Laylee. If you have any issues with it, if this is just an incomprehensible experience for you, then I can politely say that this is probably not the game or genre for you.
Well, I would tack on to that. I'm sure some of the people who have given the game lower scores are diehard fans, and I mean, it may just be that, everyone's experience is not the same, and certain people value certain aspects of a game over others.
True.
Like, I mean, I'll give the example. Banjo-Tooie is flat out one of my favorite games of all time, but I know there are a lot of people who slag it off, and the things they slag it off for, I kind of nod my head and say, yeah, that's a thing, but it doesn't bother me.
Right, and I think whether things bother you or not goes a long way towards whether you enjoy Yooka-Laylee, because the things that I think are tending to bother some people are kind of baked in to the whole throwback vibe. So let me clarify this by saying, in my opinion, after spending a few hours with it, this is the 64-bit 3D platforming revival that, say, Shovel Knight was to 8-bit side-scroller games. All right, all of the design choices in Yooka-Laylee seem to be purposeful to reflect the era that it's harkening back to. So, I can understand why some critics might think, well, couldn't they, like, it's 2017, couldn't we, do something new with this genre? But then that's kind of like pulling at threads that could threaten to unravel the whole kind of nostalgic kick that this game is designed to give.
It's interesting that you bring up Shovel Knight, because I'm wondering if maybe part of that disconnect where you're not where people aren't sure whether to read this as this is an N64 style game, warts and all, versus this is the modern advancement, enhancement. I'm at a loss for words, but you know what I mean. I'm wondering if part of the reason for that disconnect is Shovel Knight was an 8-bit throwback, but it was in the gameplay as well as presentation. It had deliberately 8-bit style sounds and graphics.
Yeah.
And I think that may kind of put you more in the mindset of it.
That's true, but I wouldn't necessarily want to sacrifice Yooka-Laylee's gorgeous visuals just to have, polygonal, low-res visuals just for the sake of kind of holding the player's hands and helping them accept that it is a game made like it was 1998. And let me be...
I don't know about you, Hyle. I don't know where to go unless I see a flat polygon plane of tree textures.
So let me be clear about something, though, first. So unlike similar revivals that, try to harken back to an earlier time, like the Kongversation's favorite New Super Mario Brothers, Yooka-Laylee does not regress to an earlier iteration. So... For example, my biggest issue with New Super Mario Brothers is it ignores the advancements that the actual Super Mario Brothers sequels made to the franchise. So it doesn't pick up where Super Mario World left off. It just goes back to the original Super Mario Brothers with some bells and whistles added to it. That is not the case with Yooka-Laylee. And while it doesn't necessarily pick up where Banjo-Tooie left off, it's certainly far more complex than Banjo-Kazooie ever was. This is a game that is not holding your hand, and it is also not a game that's really for beginners of the genre either.
It encourages you to explore the world and the terrain.
And uncover secrets. So it's kind of, from what I'm seeing, a middle ground between Kazooie and Tooie. While it doesn't pick up where Tooie left off, it kind of builds on both, with maybe a little bit of the good parts of Donkey Kong 64 baked into the formula as well. Now, I understand the argument, should Yooka-Laylee have, brought 3D platforming into the modern era? Should it have, done something different with the formula? And... after playing it, no.
The problem with substantially rewriting the rules of how the genre works is that then it wouldn't feel like Banjo-Kazooie. And I really feel like one of the operating principles of Yooka-Laylee was to atone for the sins of Nuts and Bolts, which, it itself is a fine game, mind you. We've definitely come around to it over time, but it wasn't what fans wanted back in 2008.
I liked it, but I think that's to do with I really like car and customization games.
Oh, I wouldn't have ever known that, Clutch. So, yeah, Yooka-Laylee essentially is Banjo 3. Essentially, like I said, it is definitely an advancement from Banjo-Kazooie, and it builds on aspects of Tooie. So, this is not a new Super Mario Brothers situation where it just goes back to square one for the sake of nostalgia. This is a game based in nostalgia, but only in the way it makes you feel and in some of the design choices, not in just this stubbornness of, well, this is the way it was back then, so this is the way it's got to be.
So I do want to address one of the main critical sticking points seems to be, according to them, performance issues, a bit of lag, and also some wonky camera problems, at least on the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 versions.
Well, I can report that there is some very occasional lag. I haven't really experienced too much in the way of really heinous, glaring flaws that make it unplayable. The camera itself is no worse than a classic rare N64 game, and in many ways it's better. So for all the issues with the camera, I did not have one problem with it. There are times where there is a fixed camera, which anybody who played the toy box will already know. There are points where there is a fixed camera.
And there are times where you can't maneuver the camera at all, just simply because of the landscape or a wall behind you. But if you grew up playing the N64, this is not an issue. Come on.
I have to wonder if it's like a generational thing that, I'm not saying this has anything to do with the reviewers, because obviously they're generally old enough to have lived through this era too. But with games from the N64 era, like Super Mario 64, like Banjo-Kazooie, like Banjo-Tooie, I kind of feel like it's second nature that I know I have to adjust the camera as I go. I can't just expect it to keep up with me. To an extent. I think the only 3D platformer where the camera actively interfered with what I was doing enough for me to throw my hands up was Super Mario Sunshine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think it's just a generational thing, and it's like what Matt and I brought up on the last main episode of the Kongversation. We who grew up in an earlier era of gaming kind of readily accept some of the limitations of the era, and we just kind of shrug and roll with it. It's a part of gaming,
and we replay these games pretty much every year. So it doesn't.
That's another thing. A lot of people are just going on about how this is this makes them feel like kids again, and this did make me feel like a kid again. But it also made me feel like a 33-year-old again, because I replay these games all the time. I live in this world every day of my life, running DK Vines. So this is both nostalgic throwback and last week for me. So I think that's another issue. If these games have remained part of your life, any of these perceived issues are not issues, because that is just how you play video games. And I love the fact that some of this stuff is in here, that they actually built a game like it was 1997. That's fine. One of the mantras that Playtonic, had in their mission statement when they first formed as a company was, why aren't games like this being made? And you could argue, well, they could have made this game without some of the warts, but I don't see them really as warts even. I see them as just part of what this particular breed of game has.
I can see that kind of internal crisis. At what point does this become? At what point does this become a reinvention? At what point does this become less authentic?
Right.
Are you sacrificing authenticity for accessibility? And to what extent is okay to do that? And that's a hard thing to juggle, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's probably something that Playtonic struggled with quite a bit. And I think the decisions they made ultimately did right by the fans they made this game for. They made this game for everybody who was kind of let down at first with nuts and bolts. They made this game for everybody who, has been patiently waiting for a new Banjo game, or for a 3D platformer to come up and kind of take that crown again. And all of the revivals that sprung up before Yooka-Laylee, we have Lobo Destroyo, which is still in development, but it's a very small team. it's not something that's just going to come out within a couple years.
Even though that's exactly what Playtonic did.
Well,
honestly.
but again,
and that's
Playtonic is their industry veterans who got financial backing ASAP. So,
yeah.
a little bit different there. As somebody who's somewhat involved with what the guys over at Lobo are doing, I completely sympathize with their plight. But then you've got like Hat in Time, which, looking at what they're doing with Hat in Time, it's not really harkening back to Rare. It's more of Nintendo, and well, we've already got Nintendo. So this is a game that needed to be made, and I think these were, the right guys for the job, obviously.
Yeah, and when I say that, I wasn't saying that to like slag off any of the other Kickstarter 3 platformers. What I was kind of getting at is, if you step back from the fact that these are all industry vets who, like, bluntly know what they're doing, this was an independent Kickstarter from a brand new company that had a very modest but concise scope outlined when they pitched it. They got funded, and they put it out in, I believe, just under 2 years with only a single delay.
Yeah, it's remarkable what they're able to do. And I mean, there was more efficiency involved in getting Yooka-Laylee out than there was in the old Rare bards, It's when you,
like, just if you can put it out of your mind the fact that of who these guys are, and just look at that fact, that is fucking impressive.
Yes. And I also, I think people are upset that this is a conscious throwback. I think it being a throwback was also how they were able to have such effective turnaround time. Also, building in Unity, I'm sure, helped too. They didn't have to build an engine from scratch. So that makes it a little bit smoother. The wonders of 2017. So yeah, don't worry about the performance issues, and there is going to be, a patch for them, anyway. So, it did not impact any enjoyment I had, and it wasn't even noticeable. Outside of like once I got past the menu screen, and any performance issues weren't noticeable at all. So don't worry about that. I want to talk about the tone of the game real quick. It is busting with charm. Like any Rare title, pretty much, with maybe the exception of Kinect Sports, the original Kinect Sports, just because Microsoft kind of limited how cheeky they could get with it. Like any Rare title, this is self-aware and sometimes surprisingly risque. But it's never to the extent that assholes like us are. With how risque we get.
The fuck are you talking about?
Sex. But there were a couple times playing this game that I busted out laughing at some of the jokes. And I'm going to refrain from spoilers, and I know you don't want to hear any of them, but sometimes they're kind of juvenile. Sometimes they're surprisingly blatant, and no more so than Banjo-Tooie ever was. But it's just it's nice to see, especially since like Lee Loveday had nothing to do with this game. Andy Robinson, take a drink. Andy Robinson, take a drink.
Andy Robinson.
God damn it, Cameron. We're recording this at like 10 in the morning. I don't want to be blind stinking drunk before noon. No, Andy Robinson has done a fine job of taking over the reins of dialogue writing, and very charming, very funny, and I was immensely pleased with the overall tone of the game. I know a lot of us were worried about, is this a parallel for Microsoft, or is this story about Rare? Actually, seeing the story play out, it's really not an issue. It's the story is appropriately bonkers, and you can absorb a lot of this through pre-release information, videos, magazine articles, the dollops of information that Playtonic gives out, but you can't really fully grasp it until you actually sit down with the game. And the story itself it's not as much of a piss take as, say, Conker's Bad Fur Day story was, where the Panther King wants to get Conker to replace his broken leg table because he keeps spilling his milk. It's not that much of a just fuck you to the audience, but it is weird. It is stupid in the best ways, and it also hints at this grander lore to this world that I cannot wait to uncover. For lore hounds like me who love in-game story and characters and what makes a universe tick, this game is catnip. And I know a lot of you came to DK Vine because of our enthusiasm for that kind of stuff. So I know if you're listening to this, you will probably enjoy that too.
And while we're talking about like appropriate tone and like hitting the old notes, again, I haven't played the game myself, but I did back it high enough.
What are you doing here, Cameron?
You asked me.
Oh, right. Okay. Hi. Thanks for being here.
But I did back high enough to get the digital manual, and like perusing that, like it's a time capsule from like 1998. It's exactly the kind of content I remember getting from like the Banjo-Tooie manual, the Diddy Kong Racing manual, the DKC2 manual.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the manual on the next main episode of the Kongversation, but suffice to say,
but it's just neat to have the experience of waiting for when you were a kid, you bought a new game, you couldn't play it right away because of some circumstance or another, so you're sitting in the car reading this manual to yourself, and it's like, yeah, I feel like I'm on a 72-hour car ride reading this thing.
72 hours? Where were you driving?
Because it's 3 days out. Too.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, are you driving into the ocean? Your parents need to turn around, Karen. I also want to address something that I didn't even realize was an issue in my mind until I played this, and I realized it was an issue, and then it was no longer an issue. Playing Yooka-Laylee, for real, has finally removed all barriers between Rare and Playtonic in my mind. For as much as I said, we should just think of Playtonic, yeah, they're their own independent entity, but it's essentially a secondary Rare team, who's not owned by Microsoft and, whatever, but it's essentially another Rare team. But, somewhere in my brain, I was still compartmentalizing it, Playtonic is this, these characters are over here, and yeah, we consider a part of the same shared universe, but, not really, Playing it, with all due respect to Playtonic and Rare themselves and their independence from each other and whatnot, it's removed all barriers in my mind. This is the same world. Yooka-Laylee is clearly the Rare archipelago. Once you actually dive into it, you completely forget about who owns what, which companies are what. It is a head trip playing this game. It's Rare through and through. And when you play it, like, for example, like the opening story, spoilers, there's an opening story similar to, Banjo-Kazooie, but seeing like Capital B, seeing him in motion, with dialogue fully fleshed out before my eyes, yeah, I forget that he's not owned by the same people who own, say, Gruntilda. Playtonic is Rare, and Rare is Playtonic. Full stop. If you're a fan of Rare, you're going to be a fan of this.
Thanks for giving me a carte blanche and all the Freudian slips I do with these company names.
Right. So, we are a Rare fan site at DK Vine, but I think it's safe to say we are Rare/Playtonic. There's no substantial difference. And exploring Shipwreck Creek and seeing all the pirate paraphernalia around, along with an abundance of barrels, I couldn't help but just smile. I was giddy with delight. Playtonic, Rare, Donkey Kong, it's all one big dysfunctional family. Essentially, DK Vine has operated under this mission statement, especially since 2010, and I can safely say, in this point in time, we have won. you can split hairs and say, yeah, but Nintendo owns this, and Rare owns this, and Playtonic owns this, and this company's over there, and they do this, and that company does that. Doesn't matter. It's all one thing.
All right, mission accomplished. We're scuppering the site tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Right. We'll put up the big mission accomplished banner. I'm wearing a flight suit with a cod piece, and then I fly off on a jet into the sunset. Got to address this real quick. The goldfish in Dr. Puzz's bowl is never named nor referenced. So it's Royston, folks. Just accept it. It's Royston. Wink, wink. we don't have to worry about that. They don't say he's Oliver the goldfish or anything. It's never brought up. At least so far that I've seen. Maybe it's a critical plot point at the end of the game where that goldfish is revealed to be the true bad guy. But
Bananas.
At this point in time, we're in the clear with that. I would like to end my thoughts real quick. Oh, by the way, I do have a small correction to make. On the last episode, we incorrectly said that Grant Kirkhope was one of the new Yooka-Laylee rappers. It's Kev Bayless who's doing the rap with Chris Sutherland. I and a bunch of fans apparently were mixed up because in the Kickstarter, they promised that Chris Sutherland would be reprising his role with Grant Kirkhope, and the wording made it sound like Grant Kirkhope was going to lay down the sick rhymes with Mr. Sutherland. It's actually Kev Bayless. I apologize to Kev Bayless, to Grant Kirkhope, and, not to relay to Chris Sutherland because I didn't really do anything to besmirch your honor. But, yeah, wow. I didn't think it sounded like Grant Kirkhope. I was like, wow, Grant is a really effective vocal impressionist because that sounds nothing like him.
Well, I mean, I can understand people being thrown off. I mean, if you listen to Kev Bayless speak in Rare Replay, but then consider his credits include Tricky the Triceratops, who has this, pretty high pitch. Guy's got some range.
Yeah. But I wanted to bring up the Yooka-Laylee rap real quick because one of my issues with it last time was, and it wasn't an issue, I pretty much came out and said, it's hard to really appreciate it because I don't know these characters that well. After playing the game for a few hours, the Yooka-Laylee rap is a lot more endearing. So, great job to everybody involved with that. Andy Robinson, take a drink, wrote the lyrics. Grant Kirkhope did the music, and Chris Sutherland and Kev Bayless all did a great job, and it definitely means more after you play the game and really get accustomed with all the characters. So I think, whether or not it holds up to DK rap, I don't know, but it definitely is more special now. So I want to wrap up by saying I have not had this much fun playing a game since I played Sea of Thieves. And I haven't had this much playing an officially released game since probably Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Returns and Tropical Freeze were both fantastic games, but there was always this slightly alien feeling with them, because as much as Retro Studios did a bang-up job, Retro Studios is not Rare. And they had their own style, and it was great, but it wasn't really like coming home again. Yooka-Laylee is coming home again. It is a Rare world through and through. And I had this giddy, nervous excitement in the pit of my stomach playing it for 3 straight hours. I haven't had this excitement since I would pick up a Rare game from, say Toys R Us when I was a kid, and I would get it home and read the instruction manual and play it. And I mean, my God, this game, and this is the game that's relieved the burden from Rare. Rare does not have to make this game anymore, and they're moving towards the future with Sea of Thieves, which, I've said is the most fun I've ever had playing a video game, and I stand by that. But Yooka-Laylee comes mighty close, and it's the most fun I've had playing a released game since 2003, for God's sake. I mean, my God. Don't believe the middling reviews. Try it for yourself. If you're a regular listener of this show, you will love it. So, Chris Sutherland, Gavin Price, Steve Males, Mark Stevenson, Dean Wilson, Andy Robinson,
Yay.
and everyone else, take a bow. You've done a fine job with this, and I cannot wait to play it some more and really take a deep dive, because this is going to be a stone cold classic. Sex!
This has been a File 2 production.
Qué rico.